UFC 295 at Madison Square Garden has got some big fights on it, literally. For the main event, I think is one of the best fights of the year. I think that if anyone did those UFC sweepstakes things where you got to book a fantasy main card, I booked this fight. I think that this fight is one of the best fights you could possibly make if you were given the UFC roster. I am of course talking about the former UFC Light Heavyweight Champion Ji Prochzka taking on the former UFC Middleweight Champion Alex Pereira for the vacant Light Heavyweight title. I am extremely happy to even get to talk about this fight because I love both these guys so much. They are so fun to watch. And frankly, I didn't know where the betting line was going to go on this one. At first, as you will know, we're going to be talking about Ji Prochazka today. I was surprised by that. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought I can see where they're coming from. But I think you could probably also make an argument for Jiří being a favourite, which only helps me come up with notes for this Devil's Advocate. So if you're new to Devil's Advocate, this isn't necessarily what I think is going to happen in this fight, but I am playing Devil's Advocate on behalf of the underdog, Ji Prochazka.
Congratulations. I'm coming. I'm coming!
The idea being that if you came up to me in the street and said, how does Ji Prochazka win this fight despite being the underdog, this is what I would say. But I should state that if you came up to me and said, who do you think is going to win the fight, I don't know if I'd be able to give you an answer. However, if you were like, okay, well, at least try and convince me why Jiří can win. And that is the video premise. So let's start with why Jiří is an underdog, because like I said, I was surprised at first and then it kind of made more sense to me over time. I think the most obvious thing is that when you point to Jiří's greatest strength, it is his striking. But even just imagining how the fight is going to play out, it's hard to imagine how that is going to work against a striker like Alex Pereira. Because whilst Jiří is incredibly creative, he is awkward, all of these things, his movement is super strange. He does get hit. He does leave himself open to get hit because he has his hands down a lot. He does funky movements which leave his chin exposed. And Alex Pereira needs one shot to knock you out. And he is extremely accurate and he is a world-class kickboxer, so he will be able to set that up. But again, we're not arguing for Alex Pereira, so we have to kind of put that to a side and talk about where Jiří's strengths are in this fight and where he can win. So let's dive into that. I should also mention the injury. I think that might also be a reason why he is an underdog. We haven't seen him in over a year at this point, and the injury was described as the worst shoulder injury Dana White had ever seen in the UFC, so we'll talk a little bit more about the mentality of Ji Prochazka as we get on, but why I don't think that's going to necessarily be an issue that it would be if it was other fighters. Because Ji Prochazka, if there is a fighter in the world that you could say is built different, it is that man. So let's talk about where I started with coming up with this. I would be a lot less confident in saying some of this and in picking Ji Prochazka to win this fight if it hadn't been for the Glover Teixeira fight. And I know that fight was incredibly close. I know it was a fight of the year contender. It was back and forth. A lot of people think that if Glover Teixeira hadn't shot for that guillotine in the 5th round, he would have finished the fight and would have retained the light heavyweight title. And that's all true. But he showed so many different aspects to his game, I think, in that fight. I didn't even go back and watch his previous UFC fights because, frankly, I don't need to. I've watched them a bunch of times. He's one of my favourite fighters on the roster. But against Volkan Oezdemir and against Dominic Reyes, he basically showed the same thing, and that is that he is a very dangerous, very creative striker, capable of delivering incredible knockouts, but also gets caught. He got hit a lot against Oezdemir and Dominic Reyes, and if they had more one-punch power, say the likes of a Jan Blachowicz or an Alex Pereira, they probably would have at least put him down, I think, in that fight. And of course, to further go on that point, whilst we're pointing out more of Prochazka's weaknesses, which is not what we're supposed to be doing, but hey, trying to create an all-round picture to some degree, right?
There's only one king. A true king.
He got hit a lot by Glover Teixeira and nearly finished as well. But there isn't anything necessarily that I'm going to learn from going back to watch those fights. So primarily focusing on the Teixeira fight, because I think he showed what he showed in the Reyes and Oezdemir fights in the Teixeira fight, plus a lot more. if that makes sense. And of course, we got 5 rounds of it. So let's talk about Jiří's striking for a minute, because it is bizarre. It's very effective, but it's the best way I can explain Jiří Procházka's striking is to compare him to Tony Ferguson, who is probably my favourite UFC fighter of all time. You can probably see why I like Jiří Procházka so much. They have a lot in common. His striking is incredibly unique. It is so creative. If you were going to teach somebody how to strike in MMA, you wouldn't show them Jiří Procházka, because technically, and from a game plan standpoint of things, it just isn't. It's so unique, and it works for him, but it works in very specific ways. You would probably look at somebody like a Volkanovski and say, well, his technique is flawless. You could teach that to somebody. They don't need to be a traditional martial artist with this crazy reach and crazy footwork and explosiveness that Jiří has. And that size and timing is going to be interesting, because against most strikers, for Jan Blachowicz, the perfect example, Alex Pereira's last fight, you go, well, Jan Blachowicz hits really hard, but has he got a style that Alex Pereira has seen before? Probably. He has a ton of experience in kickboxing. Of course, MMA is slightly different, but from a striking standpoint, he will know what to expect. Will he have faced a guy like Jiří Procházka? No, because even though he has probably fought strange, unorthodox strikers in the past, Jiří Procházka's style of striking is blended with MMA, right? Like, you can't do that kind of movement and stuff in the same way if you're in a kickboxing ring as you can when you're in a cage. And I think that's interesting alone, right? Because you could look at it, the thing that my mind always goes to is Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, and I know that there's probably a lot you can look into that fight, but the way that I saw it was Tony Ferguson's striking didn't work very well because Gaethje stuck to his shell, he stayed defensive, and he just timed Tony when the opportunity was there. And that worries me, because Alex Pereira could do the same thing. But Jiří Procházka is a crazy person, and he's one like I guess we'll put that down as one of the reasons why I think he might be able to win. But as much as we can say his striking might not work against Alex Pereira, you still have to acknowledge that his striking is incredibly creative, and so he could catch Alex Pereira with something that Alex just doesn't see coming. But I think the bigger argument for why Jiří can win this fight and reclaim the light heavyweight title is his all-round game. In the Glover Teixeira fight, we saw a lot more of his grappling than we had seen in the previous fights, both defensively and offensively. I don't think defensively we need to get into, because Alex Pereira is probably not going to shoot for takedowns and things like that. I don't think he's going to be in a position to put Jiří in trouble. The one thing that it is worth pointing out is how aware he was on the ground at all times. Of course, Glover was able to get him in some good positions and things like that. Glover is a phenomenal grappler, especially when he is on top, but Jiří, for the most part, was able to keep himself safe, at least from a submission standpoint. He did take some ground and pound, but he was able to cover up, and so I think that I don't expect him to get taken down or anything like that, but I do think awareness on the ground goes hand in hand with his offensive capabilities on the ground, which we saw in that fight. He didn't, when Glover Teixeira found himself on the ground, he didn't follow him to the ground, which was smart, but when he picked the right moments to do it, if you know what I mean. Like, the times where he did choose to go to the ground and then ground and pound, he picked the right opportunities to do it so that he wouldn't get caught in something. And also, of course, the finish of that fight, the submission, one of the most opportunist submissions I've seen in the UFC. You know, it's a really close fight. Jiří nearly gets finished in the 5th round, and just when you think, wow, what an incredible fight, you know, everyone's already typing out their tweets and they're doing their write-ups of what an incredible story it has been watching Glover Teixeira be the light heavyweight champion and then go to war with the guy that a lot of people thought would be the new champion. And then suddenly, Jiří locks up a submission out of nowhere, and just like that, it's over. And that's really important. And I guess we can go into speaking a little bit more about Pereira and his last fight, because that's the other fight that I think that you have to look at when judging this fight, and that is, of course, his light heavyweight debut against Jan Blachowicz. And in the first round, Jan Blachowicz controlled Alex on the ground. He wasn't able to do a whole lot with it. I was impressed with how Alex was able to keep himself safe in that first round, but he was dominated on the ground. And there were a few times where it looked like he might get a submission. And when I look at those positions and what Jiří would do in those positions versus what Jan chose to do, I just feel like those positions suddenly become a lot more dangerous to Alex Pereira. Not just because Jiří can lock up submissions quickly and he is an opportunist, he's so creative, but also he's really good, at least from what I saw in the Teixeira fight, at choosing when to strike with people on the ground. And Alex Pereira might know how to keep himself safe in submissions, but is he going to be able to do that when he's being hit? Is he going to be able to do that when Jiří is looking for submissions that Alex is not even going to see coming, you know? Also worth pointing out in the Glover Teixeira fight that he did get hurt a lot, but man, the chin on Jiří Procházka is absolutely crazy. I mean, some of the shots he took from Oezdemir and Reyes as well would drop most people. Admittedly, Alex Pereira probably does hit harder than all three of those people. So, you know, it's a styles make fights thing. You know, you can say how tough Jiří Procházka is, but Alex Pereira hits insanely hard and accurate as well. The timing is phenomenal. The main point to make is Jiří mixing it up. The slight caveat to that point is it's like saying, well, Tony Ferguson is a better wrestler than Paddy Pimblett, for example. He could go in there and just take him down and hold him down. It's Tony Ferguson. He's not going to do that. He is not that kind of fighter that is going to eke out a decision when you know that. And I don't think Jiří Procházka is like that as well. I think that he will probably stand with him for a while. And then if the opportunity is there, he will go for something if he thinks he can finish the fight in that way. But he's not going to come out like Jan Blachowicz did against Alex Pereira and shoot for a takedown right off the bat just to keep things guessing. But I do think that mixing it up is where Jiří Procházka can win this fight. Because Alex Pereira, as chaotic as Jiří is with his striking, Alex still needs time to set strikes up, right? He is a very patient fighter that waits for his opportunities, and he is obviously incredible at doing that. But if you're able to keep switching it up, keep throwing new things at him, and you can keep him guessing, I know that saying that you're going to keep one of the best kickboxers we've ever seen in the UFC guessing is difficult to imagine, but mixing up takedowns, clinching, knees, elbows, everything. If Jiří can combine his entire arsenal as a traditional martial artist who showed some really good grappling skills against Glover Teixeira, then I think that is where he can win this fight. Slight side note to mention that I hadn't even considered until I was making my notes. Usually I kind of bullet point and then fill in the details from there, but the experience Jiří Procházka has in MMA is absolutely crazy. So according to Tapology, Jiří Procházka has a pro MMA record of 29-3-1. That is absolutely crazy. His last loss coming in 2015 to Mo Lawal in the Rising World Grand Prix. And his previous losses 2013 and 2012. So a lot earlier on in his career. His win streak that he's on is absolutely crazy. But that is another big part of keeping Alex Pereira guessing, being able to throw things at him that he isn't prepared for, because as difficult as it is to prepare for an elite level kickboxer like Alex Pereira, it is insanely difficult to find people that not only fight like that, who throw kicks like that, and who hit that hard. It's even harder, I would imagine, to train for a guy like Jiří Procházka, because even Jiří Procházka, I imagine, doesn't know what he's going to do next. He doesn't know what submissions and what attacks he's going to throw at Alex Pereira until he's throwing them. Jan really suffered from that fight being at altitude with his grappling heavy offense. That third round, you know, it was 1-1 going into the third, and Jan just didn't seem to have anything in the gas tank. He didn't seem to, I think that, you know, of course, this isn't like an excuse for Jan. That was a result of him grappling so heavy in the first round, but a very, very close fight, and I don't expect Jiří Procházka to get tired. Even if he was grappling, I just don't see it. He just seems very efficient, despite his crazy movement and crazy attacks. But that pace against Glover Teixeira was pretty crazy, and that went 25 minutes. Of course, Alex Pereira is a difficult one. He obviously won't get tired if he's standing up striking. That's what he does, and he fights so efficiently. There is no wasted movement, and grappling, it's hard to tell because Jan got more tired than he did in the grappling exchanges, and so we don't know, but that is a factor that I'm sure will get talked about leading up to the fight if Jiří can keep him busy and kind of tire out those muscles that Alex Pereira isn't as used to using in terms of being on the floor grappling. So I think that just about sums it up. Jiří Procházka, I think that whilst his striking leaves him vulnerable to Alex Pereira's biggest strength, it also is a very interesting counterpoint. And mix in the grappling that we saw against Glover Teixeira, the opportunist submissions on ground and pound, and just the fact that he has a crazy chin, he's got crazy cardio, and of course he has the ability to end the fight in one shot, just like Alex Pereira does. And I think this fight is going to be very interesting. One absolutely insane fight this is going to be. Two of the best characters in MMA, two of the most exciting guys in MMA, and I cannot wait for this light heavyweight main event. Let us know what you want to see us do in the future on Devil's Advocate. We got a few plans in place, but always good to have new suggestions. And of course, let us know your prediction for this fight. Do you think Jiří can get the job done, or is Poatan going to claim another gold belt? All right. I'll catch you later. Enjoy the fights.